Hello, humane marketers. Sarah Znakrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Hey, Scott, so good to see you, talk to you.
Yeah, hi, Sarah. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, this time not in real life, but almost.
Feels like it's becoming real life, doesn't it? We do so many of the calls.
It does. Yeah, it does. So excited to talk to you. And as I mentioned in the intro that I read for the podcast, I organize these conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And yours, I just felt like, naturally it fit under passion, because to me, you're just such a passionate guy. And so I wanted to kind of highlight that and also talk about this idea of passion and purpose and all of that. So I think the obvious question is, what are you passionate about?
Yeah, well, thanks, Sarah. Look, I guess the most important thing I'm passionate about is action. And of course, underpinning that is a passion for nature. I grew up in rural Australia. I have a deep passion and connection with nature, but it goes deeper than that. I think it really is. You can sit in nature and enjoy yourself, but when you see bad things happening or damaging things happening to nature, I think my passion really is for action. I like doing things. I like getting out there and doing things, but from that place of belief, of a passion for nature. Yeah.
That's interesting, because in a way they're like almost contradictory to me, because nature is just, being, and you're saying action, which to me makes me think of doing. So maybe go a bit deeper into explaining, what do you mean by action?
Yeah, well, for me, it means when you see something, and I know we're going to come on to this later, but when you see something needs fixing because something bad's happening to something you love and care for, I don't like sort of sitting by. I get this intense feeling that I've got to do something. I've got to do my part. I may not be able to solve the problem myself, but I've got to make my contribution. And perhaps that's where the passion is. Maybe action is not the right word. This passion for contributing, passion for doing something. And my passion for nature runs deep within me. And I include humans in that. I don't. I think I am nature and you're nature. We're all nature. So sometimes people assume when you talk about the environment versus social, they're two different things. Well, for me, they're not. When I think about nature, I think of humanity being included in that, and the more than human world, all the rocks, all the plants, all the animals, all of the things that traditionally I learn at school is nature, which is painted as being somewhat separate from us, we humans. But I don't see it that way. Climate change is a great example where our actions have affected nature and ourselves so dramatically. And this is where it comes back to this question of doing something, of contributing. Got to do something, got to try and make a contribution in that space to make things better.
Yeah. I can't help but thinking about Australia, and probably not everybody, because there's big cities as well, but I had a client who was also kind of from rural Australia, and like this deep connection with nature. Do you think that's like, did you grow up in a family where everybody was more connected to nature than maybe we are over here? Or is that just a stereotype?
Yeah, look, I think it probably is a bit of a stereotype. I grew up in a rural country town, which is now big. It was only 30 miles out of Melbourne. And of course, the suburban sprawl has now gone right past
Right.
out into the rural areas where I used to just run and roam freely. And I had 4 dogs. We had a lot of animals, chickens and ducks and things like this. I was in an area where there were horses and cows and agriculture.
Hmm.
And my family more or less my parents let me roam free. So long as I came home at night and sat down at the dinner table and ate some dinner, they didn't really mind too much. Well, I don't know if they minded. I don't know if they noticed that I wasn't there. And it was just a wonderful opportunity for me. And some people might turn that around and say, oh, your parents didn't really care about you. Well, when I bought jars of redback spiders home for my mum that I'd caught during the day, she cared a lot then. And she'd get those spiders. What's wrong with you? So, it was just I think it was a great opportunity as a young boy to just go and explore and, look at frogs and tadpoles and all the wildlife that exists in Australia, snakes, nasty spiders. I was surrounded by them all, and you find a connection to them and a respect for them, I think, and that's really infused my life.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of what's lost here, right? And I guess mostly also because a lot of us live in big cities, so there's not that possibility to be close to nature all the time. Even though there's parks, but it feels like kind of a fake nature, if you want, because it's human made.
Yeah, they're
But
generally safe places, that's for sure. I mean, in Australia, I think I don't know what the figure is now, but it's more than 80% of the population live in the cities. Melbourne,
wow.
Sydney, the big Brisbane, all the big cities, and there's this vast area inland from the coast where there's very few people, and there's a lot of nature. Well, that said, there's big agriculture too. So the nature there has been, put under the plough, for example, or changed through farming. But yeah, I think that I do think you're right. I think in cities, we and of course not just in cities, but lately, I think the last 10 or so years, we've all. And where would we be now without Zoom in the middle of the pandemic? But these things are relatively recent, and so many young people, but people of our age, I don't want to say old people, Sarah, but people my age are
Thank
starting
you.
yeah, certainly not you. But we're getting more and more sedentary in a way. And I think we've got to be intentional to get up out of our chairs and go out and find ourselves a bit of nature. I certainly try to every day, but I know a lot of people, you get overwhelmed with work, you commute into the office, or you just go home and you're at home with remote working, and you go from the breakfast table to your desk, to lunch, to your desk, and opportunities to get out are rare. And so I think we've got to be intentional about it, and we've got to have that passion underpinning it to get us out there.
Yeah, and really that's kind of the segue to what you are doing now, and in a way your passion led to your business passion and what you're doing now, and getting people out of their chair and into the woods. So tell us a bit more about that and your forest walks and all of that.
Yeah, no, I've always taken people. I've spent a lot of time in forests all my life. Back in 1999 when I started the Forest Trust, that was a non-profit based in the UK, trying to support companies to be more environmentally and socially responsible. Let's just say more responsible to the planet. And that work took me to places all around the world, and I've been privileged to see so many different places and cultures and, and natural environments. But I left that in 2019. The organisation's going great guns and doing their thing. But I wanted to look at sort of taking the lessons that I'd learned sitting in the boardrooms of some pretty large companies with CEOs, some of the largest companies in the world, trying to help them find this different way of working in the world. And one of the things that became clear to me was that I was able to do that when I was able to help those leaders get connected to who they were as people. When they were making decisions from their brain, which was usually things around profit and loss, brand value, quarterly results, KPIs, or, all of those terms, work plans, budgets, everything became sort of pretty cold. But when the NGOs hung off their building, like Greenpeace saying, you're destroying the world's forests,
Mm.
and things became pretty warm and actually pretty hot, and people got pretty stressed and upset. And my job was to go in there and sort of help them find calm and say, well, do you really want to be linked to deforestation and the death of orangutans? Do you want to be linked to human rights abuses? And of course, the answer was always no, but they didn't know how to find their way out. And it wasn't for me to tell them, because everyone's different. But what it was for me was to help them find that connection where they said, we can do this. We can find a way out. And so I learned through that if we're going to get change in the world, it's not that we impose change on others. It's not that we make other people change, because that doesn't work. We've got to inspire them to travel their own journey to a different place. And I found that I was able to do that when I was able to help them find calm, sometimes get them out in nature, but certainly have them thinking about nature. Sometimes we're in the top story of a large building somewhere in a big city in the world. You're a long way from nature. Getting to understand what's happening out there in the natural world was pretty critical. And so, coming back to your question, a lot of what I'm doing now is trying to get people out there in nature so that they can find that calm. I find that when we go into nature, our mind starts to slow down. We start to feel things, and we hear sounds, we smell things. You don't get a lot of the senses. You don't get a lot into your body when you're sitting behind your desk. You're just using sight and sound, really, very narrow range of senses. But when you're out in nature, you're seeing different things, you're smelling different things, you can touch things, you can even taste things if you're up for it. You can really get into your body, and you're walking. And so, your heart starts pumping, the blood starts working, and your mind calms. And when that happens, my experience is some of that inner wisdom that we have can start being heard. It doesn't get drowned out by the whirring of our vastly intelligent brains. And we can find our way. We can find our way, say, right, this is what I need to do. Another part of it is, you can't protect something. You don't protect things that you don't love. And so finding that connection with nature, I think, helps people to take action to protect it.
Yeah, so much in there. Thanks for sharing that. For me, what it really is, I try to go on a daily walk, an hour or so. Can't always do it, and sometimes it rains. It's rained a lot in Switzerland lately. We usually get some kind of break during the day, and that's when I rush out and I'm like, okay. And to me, really, this notion of, like you mentioned, your mind calms down, and it calms down because nature just is, and there's nothing you need to change about it. Whereas entrepreneurs, we're always thinking, what do I change? What do I need to do? What do I need to improve? How do I make this work better? So our mind is constantly going, 1,000 miles per hour, trying to solve things, where in nature, it's just is. And most of the time it's beautiful. Right. So you don't need to change anything. So I think, there's so much power in that. And like you mentioned, a lot of people's lives, maybe now a bit less with COVID, but even so, if you were in a 9-to-5 job, and now this 9-to-5 job has just been transferred to a home 9-to-5 job, people still don't go out. So it really is kind of a pushing yourself to go out there and just be in nature and listen. I feel like a big part of what you are about, but also what you help people do is listen and, just be quiet, and then find the way to yourself.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Sarah. Honestly, my sense is, nature doesn't judge us. We can go out there, just be us. We don't have to wear flash clothes. We don't have to get dressed up for some important meeting where we feel pretty uncomfortable. When we go out there, we can just be us. And I think this is the magic. And when we find our connection to ourselves is when we can start listening to that inner wisdom. And we've all got it. But I often talk about the hardest 50 or 60 centimeters. I'm a big, tall, thin fella. So for me, it's a bit of a 60 centimeter journey from my brain to my gut. I measured it once just to try, I imagine for some people it's a bit shorter or maybe even longer, but for me, it's about 60 centimeters from this whirring thing. And as you've mentioned, our brain gets swamped with so many information sources. Someone says you should do this, another one says you should do that, another one says you're not doing this right, another one says you are. And you've got to start making judgments about the right way to go. And of course, some of these things can be hugely conflictual and confusing, and we get stuck. And so what I try and do is try and help people. And this is, you mentioned taking people out in the forest, these forest therapy walks and things like this. It's all about just slowing down, turning the mind off. And for me, getting them from their brain down into their, well, for me, it's the gut. I always point to my belly button. That's where I think the wisdom lies. And unfortunately for some people, there's a bit of a steel reinforced concrete block sitting around their chest level, and they just can't get there because they're so programmed to be in their brain that, the brain, I think, therefore I am, has been a big philosophy, I think, that's caused humans a lot of problems. We don't feel things. I often say to people, feel first, then think. Like, how does it feel? Is there resonance there? Does it feel okay that you're being linked to human rights abuses, that you're linked to the death of orangutans? How does that feel? Well, it doesn't feel real good. And where are you feeling it? Well, you're not feeling it up here in your head. You're feeling it in your body. It feels, there's shame, there's judgment there. You don't want to talk to your mum about it. These are bad things. So go with that feeling. And once you go with that feeling, then engage your powerful brain. Like, we need our brains to make work plans, to make procedures, to give action. So it's not that I'm saying let's not use our brain, but take it away from primacy. Put the primacy down into your more bodily feeling, that inner wisdom inside, that connection to your values and who you are as a person, and act from that place. And my experience is that can bring huge change. It can bring extraordinary performance to a business. I know that, that's an important thing for us entrepreneurs. It's not that, and some people say, oh, it's all spiritual nonsense. You know what? When you're dealing with the world's largest food company in Nestle, the world's largest palm oil company, and you sit with people, and you mentioned it, most of my work is listening, letting people find their way to their own connection and operating from there. They need someone to listen to them. And when you see them connect to that, whoosh, off they go. And they bring so much power of their budgets, of their bottom lines. They've got a lot of resources. When they say we don't want to be linked to something, watch out. These are the people you need to motivate, but they need to be motivated from themselves, not from someone wagging their finger at them and giving them judgment. That tends to have them scurrying in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I want to just bring it back also to marketing, because what you just mentioned about, people, how they bring in the feelings. I often say that also in marketing. Until now, we've always addressed only the left brain in our marketing message and communications. But it is so important that we also address the right brain of people. So really create marketing material that is beautiful, whimsical, and addresses feelings, because people nowadays, conscious clients, customers, they are no longer only, making buying decisions with their left brain. Does this work? How much does it cost? How long is it, etc. But they're also starting to think, well, how is it going to make me feel? Does it feel good if I buy this product? Does it feel good if I work with this person? Are our values aligned? All these kind of bigger picture questions, right?
Absolutely spot on. And what happens with people when they're working in a situation where their values aren't aligned? They're going to work every day thinking, God, this is not who I am. Stress levels start to go up, all sorts of illnesses creep in. I talk about the well-being ladder. They start falling down this ladder. They start getting to burnout pretty quickly because they're just not being who they are. And that's a place of dissonance.
Yeah.
We need to find a place of resonance. So, on the downside of the marketing is when companies say all these grand things because they're the cliches of the day. Everyone's got to be carbon zero. And then in practice, they're not doing anything about it. Then the people who work for the company, who care about these issues, start feeling that dissonance, and they start saying, hold on a minute, there's a bit of greenwashing, or we could use other words starting with B and S, that that doesn't resonate with who I am. And they start, geez, should I be working for this company? So all of those things kick in. And this is why we see, I think increasingly, as people are starting to understand that climate change, ocean plastics, pollution, human rights abuses are a very real and very large part of life. They don't want to be associated with those things. So they're looking for the leaders of the companies that they work for. The leaders themselves are looking to set clear direction and then implement those things. And you set them, and then any marketing that, makes a little bit of story out of it that's different from reality, you quickly get called out, and that dissonance that it creates can affect your performance very dramatically. So, the key thing that I always say to people is, who are you? Don't worry about what your customers are asking for. Who are you? And speak from that place and act from that place. So I come back to action, act from there, and people will start saying, we can trust those people. We'll buy their products, or we'll buy their services, because they seem to have it together.
I love that you're saying that, because that so much in the marketing world, over the past 10 years, I've heard it over and over and over again, focus on your target audience, your persona. And so I've chased after this, ideal client for so many years without first paying attention to who I was. And so there was a huge misalignment because, well, eventually, you just kind of crumble because you're wearing this mask for all this time, pretending to be someone you're not. And so that's why it's so important to bring more of you to your marketing and bring your values and bring your passions. And if that's, forest walks, talk about that. I think that the world is ready for you to be more open about, your passions. And it's not true that people don't care about you. There was this message also in the marketing world saying that people don't care about you, they just care about how you help them, or they care about themselves. I don't think that's true. I think people don't care about how much money you make, or, what kind of titles you have, and, all your success stories. Maybe they don't care much about that, but they care about you as a human being, and they want to see that you are aligned with their values. That's what they care about.
I just can't agree more strongly with you, Sarah. I've sat in dark rooms over many years with the CEOs and leaders and leadership teams of companies, and people say, "Oh, how did you do it? How did you bring them to change?" Well, it wasn't just me. There was a whole ecosystem of change, but I sometimes just provided that little drop of pixie dust on the top, and what it was their heads were spinning. They were going crazy as they were getting beaten up by the NGOs, and I was the guy that went in there and just sat quietly and listened. And I've been screamed at, I've been yelled at. Why? Not because they hated me, because Greenpeace wasn't in the room, or Mighty Earth wasn't in the room. The NGO wasn't there. So I had to scream at someone. Yeah. And I was the guy that took it. I had to clean my glasses because, when people really scream at you, all the stuff comes out. And I'm like, excuse me, hold on a second, carry on. Let me just clean my glasses. You've got to be able to cope with that. And so when people say to me, how do we bring change? I'm like, just be yourself. Just go into that room and be yourself. Because after a while, when they've screamed at you 4 times and you're still there and you're smiling and you're saying, yeah, look, I hear you, they start calming down and they're saying, we can trust this person. This person isn't judging us, and we can find a way forward. So I think in terms of inspiring people to be the best they can be in the world, we have all we need. We don't need grand qualifications. We just need to be ourselves. But for that, you've got to be connected to yourself. You've got to know who you are. And that's where the work is. The work is not in a lot of, great to have qualifications. It's great. We learn a lot of knowledge, but that's not the work. Mm. The work is to understand who you are as a person and to live from that place as often as you can.
That brings me to this great picture you have on your website of a man. It's like a cartoon, a man praying to a duck. And I think it has something to do with that, right? So take us there.
Yeah, it does. So I'm very lucky. I grew up in Australia, and we have a cartoonist. He's more a philosopher, really, called Michael Looney, and bit of a controversial character sometimes. And I think a lot of his work, and he does a lot of whimsy and things like this. And sometimes he even says, I don't even know what this cartoon's about, but I felt I draw it. And I love that. But much of his work has deep meanings behind it. And I grew up with it over, he's 76, I think now. I've looked at his cartoons for many years. And back in 1990, he published a book of prayers, which many people thought was very strange and out of character because he never struck anyone as being particularly religious. Mm-hmm. And he was actually forced to explain that it's not about religion, though it's about the act of praying and the act of connection to something deep within you. And what was interesting, and he wrote this beautiful introduction to explain this picture that he had of a man. I prefer to call it a person now to make sure that I'm politically correct. But
very good, yes.
Talks about it as being a man, but it's a person praying to a duck. And I just before we came on, I just opened the text, and just a little paragraph. It says, the duck in the picture symbolizes one thing and many things: nature, instinct, feeling, beauty, innocence, the primal, the non-rational, and the mysterious unsayable. Qualities we can easily attribute to a duck, and qualities which, coincidentally and remarkably, we can easily attribute to the inner life of the kneeling man. to his spirit or his soul. The duck then in this picture can be seen as a symbol of the human spirit, and in wanting connection with his spirit, it is a symbolic picture of a man searching for his soul.
Mm.
And this just, I was a young lad, well, younger lad when I read this the first time, and it just connected with me completely. And he goes on to say that it's a lifetime struggle to try and get close to the duck, to get connected to that duck. And of course, it's a lot easier sometimes to talk to people about ducks than it is to talk about their soul. And you start going into a room of business people and start talking about souls, and oh, hold on, this is weird. They get a bit freaked out. Let's talk about ducks. Okay, that's much easier. Principle, and he talks about it being a lifetime struggle. But what's interesting is he also talks about it being a social and political act, in the sense that the searcher influences those around them. And this has been my experience. If you can live, as truly as you can, and we never get there 100%. We always fail somewhere along the way. We stumble, but if we can get as connected to it as we can, we influence those around us to strive to do the same. And I think when people said, how did you get, Nestle to sign a no deforestation commitment? Well, I just went in there as myself, and that inspired them to be themselves. We developed trust. Same with the palm oil companies that I worked with, the pulp and paper companies. It took longer for some. There had to be a lot of trust built in a place where there wasn't trust. But when they found that connection, it was like, stand back. They went for it. And my job is just to, be there with them. So I think that there is much to be said in any job, anything we do, to find this connection to yourself. And if we can live our life from that place, we can inspire many things. And that includes great bottom lines on company balance sheets, because people want to work with people like that. So you're right. Let's, if we can focus more on those, who we are as people. I always say to people, you are going out there into the world looking for a needle in the haystack with your marketing. You're looking for the client, the perfect client. Well, what if you're the needle in the haystack? What if you're the thing that your clients need to find? Well, they need to know who you are. They need to know what this needle looks like. And this needle that I'm looking at is a Sarah-shaped needle, and I can see the outer Sarah.
Sure, it's not a duck.
Not that ducky look about you, but the thing is, I need to know if I'm going to work with you. And I've been fortunate enough that I have got to know you, not completely, but I know that what's inside Sarah's outer shell, things that align with what's inside me. So I'm like, yeah, I'll talk to Sarah. I'll be interested to hear what she's got to say. I trust her.
Exactly.
So I think, understand that you're the needle in the haystack, not your perfect client. Turn it around. Let be yourself, and they will find you.
Love it. Yeah. And I gotta say, I really love this idea of the duck. It makes some really deep talk very playful. And like you said, you can bring it up in a corporate setting, or you can, because sometimes this is kind of like heavy. And for me as a Capricorn, I'm also just like very grounded and very pragmatic. And so sometimes if someone takes me too far up into, up there, I'm like, I like the idea of a duck. It really does work for me.
Yeah. And I say to people, what's your animal? My animal just sort of by default became a duck because I read this when I was so young.
Yeah.
And we had
it could be any.
What's your animal? I've got a fellow that I work with. His is a chamois, the little goat that lives up in the mountains. That's what he feels is the voice inside him. I'm like, go for it. Let yourself go.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. I'm trying to kind of bring it back together and come full circle. And the question that comes up is like, well, how does this all matter? And we already kind of hinted at it, but how does this matter for us as entrepreneurs? Yes, we mentioned, yes, we need to bring more of us into our marketing, but as entrepreneurs, our business is our life, and our life is our business. So I feel like it impacts much more than your marketing. I'd like to hear your take on it.
I think it impacts everything. My experience with running the TFT was we put our values front and center, and we grappled every day with the challenge of living true to them. As I say, we didn't always make it, but we never failed spectacularly to the point where people would say, oh, you're greenwashing dodgy so-and-sos. Mm-hmm. I think people always got the sense that we were striving to live according to our values, and our values were truth, respect, courage, compassion, and humility. And we had a coat of arms. There was our business plan that was in all of our offices around the world, and this bound our teams together. You can't achieve great results in any company, even if you're a manufacturing company and you've got robots doing all the manufacturing for you. Someone's got to program the robots, and maybe in time that won't be necessary, but somewhere along the way we need people, and those people, you need good people. So, my experience is, I would go out and I would talk about TFT, and it became dangerous because every time I did that and talked about the things that we were doing and the values and the way we acted, we'd get about 20 CV submissions of people wanting to come and work with us. We only had maybe 1 or 2 jobs, or none at the time.
Right.
And get another 50 companies saying, we'd like to work with you as well.
Yeah.
And so what happened over a long period is we, not initially, because I think people weren't sure and they thought this was all a bit weird. This was, back in 1999. I think it's more acceptable now, but it just became our greatest pillar, if you like. Everything was anchored around this way of being, and people wanted to work for us, and we got the brightest and best candidates coming to work for us, and then we could just set them free and say, go for it, go and do this work, which meant that we were able to take our operations to scale so much more dramatically. And we weren't a company, a non-profit that could rely on technology. We relied on trust building face to face with people, from business leaders all the way down to communities Indigenous people living in the forests of Africa. We had to build trust with them. And I think it goes the same for any business. So if you can act from that place, people can read you. Most people, my fundamental belief is that most people are pretty good. And when you take off those masks that we talked about earlier, those veneers of trying to pretend to be something you're not, people can see through that. And when you take that off, behind most people, even if they've been traumatized and had bad experiences through their lives, deep down inside, there's good people, there's good in everyone. And if you act from that place, people can read you and they want to work with you. You become their needle in the haystack. And there's a lot of people looking for needles in haystacks, and you become the bright, you raise your torch, and people see the light above the horizon and say, I'm going there. I want to work. I don't even know who they are, but I've heard a lot and I see that light. I want to be associated with that. Yeah. I think and I don't talk about, life, professional and personal life, business life and personal life. I just talk about life. Yeah. So I think the mission for all of us is to live truly to who we are, and then great things will unfold.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah. I think, like you said, it applies to anything. It applies to your personal relationships and your business relationships and beyond that. So yeah, this is really, really good. Thank you so much, Scott. I want to ask you to share where people can find out more about you. We haven't even had time to talk about your My Carbon Zero project. We'll have to do another episode on that.
Happy to do that.
That's kind of a separate topic. And so, yeah, let's reconnect for that. But tell us, about your company A Different Way and where people can find you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. No, well, if people just Google Scott Poynton, they'll generally find my website, which is just scottpoynton.com. And I talk about A Different Way there. Like all websites, it needs a bit of updating and things like that, but it's all pretty much there. And as you say, I've set up an initiative called My Carbon Zero to try and inspire people to take climate action. That's just mycarbonzero.org. It's a new foundation that I've set up here in Switzerland. Part of my problem is I've got too many things going on. That's the Pond Foundation.
I told you you're passionate. It's like...
Exactly. Yeah. The Pond Foundation, which is where My Carbon Zero sits, it's really, I think it's, after many years, it's the culmination of this idea that when I was a young kid, my place of sanctuary was a pond, and that's where you could go and find calm. So, calm and chaos. That's one element of the Pond Foundation. And that was the lesson that I found when I was sitting in those dark rooms with the leaders of these companies. Give them calm and they'll find their way to a better place. But it's also this idea of a ripple. When you drop a stone into a pond, it sends these ripples out. And I think we need to do that. So that's the Pond Foundation, pondfoundation.org. But we do have My Carbon Zero as a key initiative there. And then A Different Way is really just more or less what I'm talking about. Turn things on their head and spend your life trying to be you as opposed to trying to be something else for someone else. And I think if you can do that, your well-being will spiral to wonderful heights. All of those around you will benefit from the joy of being with you. And that includes your business partners, the people who work for you, your investors, and your clients. It seems to me to be the way to great success, a happy life, and doing something useful for the planet.
Love it. Amazing. I always ask one last question, Scott, and that's, what are you grateful for today or this week?
I'm grateful for the breath in my lungs, and just grateful to still be here. There's a lot of people who aren't, and still going for it, still seeing what can be done to bring, to bring things into a better place. So yeah, and grateful to be talking to you, Sarah.
Likewise. Yeah. Until we meet again.
Good on you. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.